Dave Russell and Nora Sanders interviewing Craig Cole today. And thank you so much for having us in your house for this. You've got a great place here right by the lake.
Thank you.
So, we'd like just maybe give us a little background as to what the situation is here with the house and how it came to be. Can you do that for us?
Well, it was the family summer cottage, the Darch family, and arguably they were it was the first cottage built on Orchard Beach, maybe the first summer cottage in Port Stanley, although other people sometimes dispute this, but it was certainly the cottage. We used to always call it the big cottage because this was a little one-room cabin, which in about, when was it? About 1954, I think. Yes, in the wake of Hurricane Hazel, my mom and dad decided that they were getting a little bit what we called the big cottage. The old Darch cottage was a little bit crowded at that point, and my mom and dad decided they would like a cabin of their own. So they bought a house which was falling over the bank and divided it up into 3 parts, and 1/3 of it got moved down, and the room we're sitting in right now was the one-room originally. Well, originally this was the porch of the one-room cabin, and then of course we started building on this, and I think now we're up to about 4 additions, but it's been in the family. This property has been in the Darch family for a long time.
A long time. So back, we're talking 1800s, eh?
Yes. Let's see. According to the London Free Press, John K. Darch bought the original Darch cottage in 1907, and again, according to the London Free Press, it had been built in 1883.
And so the property we're on, that was your family's property, there's still 2 cottages that were originally part of your family's...
Not originally. The original Darch cottage was the cottage which is right over there, right. And you're welcome to take photographs of that from our deck later on if you wish to do so. But that was the original Darch cottage, and then this little one-room cabin that we're in now was moved here in 1954.
So tell us about your childhood. When you were a child and first came to Port Stanley, I think you said that was as an infant. Were you in the big cottage or in the cabin that we're in now?
That was in the big cottage, and I was 3 months old at the time, and that's an interesting story. My dad was an ophthalmologist in London, and he finished his training in about 1937 and went over to London he finished his medical degree from UW and went over to London, England, to finish his optical training so he could be an ophthalmologist. While he was there, 1937, 1938, war rumors, is everything going to happen? Well, maybe it was. And then I arrived on the scene. I was born on March 29th, 1939. And I think maybe this was a slightly unplanned event because my mom had been married for several years before that. But, I came along and, oh dear, what are we going to do? They're going to start dropping bombs on London, and it's going to be terrible. So my dad said, well, all right, I can get a little bit of time off from the hospital. And he loaded myself and my dad and my mom on this boat. Brought us back. Actually, we have a photo. Do you want to find that photo? So brought us back, us being my mother and my father and myself, on a boat which arrived in Halifax. Margie and I visited the Halifax archives a few years back and found the record of my arrival in England, and it's sort of rubric
At 1
as
month old.
1 month old. So here we were. So it would have been that, no, that was March 29th. It would have been that summer. It would have been my first summer in Port Stanley, because the whole Darch family would come down here for the summers, and I would stay in the big cottage with my aunts.
So tell us about your aunts. Tell us about the rest of the family that was here, your big family group.
Did your dad go back to
My
London?
dad went back to England to finish up that part of the story. My dad went back to England to finish his training. He did another finished his first year, and then maybe go to Rochester, New York, for another 2 or 3 years of postgraduate training. So my mom and I moved with him to Rochester, and those are my earliest memories in Rochester. We had an apartment, and I remember looking out the window at the garbage truck. That was the big thing for me, when the garbage truck went by our apartment in Rochester. So my dad was in Rochester for I guess until about 43, when he finished his training, and then joined the Canadian Army, and worked with the Canadian Army for a couple of years until the end of the war in 45.
So when you came here as a small child, your dad mostly wouldn't have been here. Is that right? You were here with your mom and your
That
aunts?
is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Your mother and
And my aunts, yes.
and that were your mother's sisters? Or-
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
That made a lot of sense.
So then, following along with the story of how Margie and I eventually ended up here, I graduated in medicine from UWO in 1963, and moved down to Montreal to do my internship, and spent a couple of years in Montreal, and then we both moved to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, to where I finished up studying as a nephrologist, and then subsequently moved back to Montreal, and we lived in Montreal for the next 30 years or so. I taught at McGill and ran a couple of dialysis units there, and then we eventually decided to retire, and we came back to Port Stanley in, when was it, 50...
We came to Port Stanley permanently in 97.
Okay.
1997.
Okay, and became very interested in the history of Port Stanley, and at that time, what is now Heritage Port, was the Port Stanley LACAC, Local Architectural
Architectural Conservancy Committee.
whatever,
That had
whatever. We could look up what LACAC stood for. It was the government organization, and it had sort of what I used to call the Port Stanley old timers, and now I laugh that you're interviewing me because now I'm a Port Stanley old timer. But in those days, Heritage Port was these 3 or 4 people who met around a table in the library, and then that committee was dissolved and sort of reinvented as Heritage Port, which was a very active heritage group, and still is a very active.
So you were part of that forming of the Heritage Port Stanley that we know today.
I was, chair of Heritage Port for many years.
So in all that time that you were doing your career, your aunts kept the Darch cottage?
Yes,
And they kept using that as their summer home.
yes.
And did you come here in the summers during those years?
Oh, yes. Not most years, every year. I think this was the big highlight of the summer holidays, that I would live with my aunts for 2 or 3 months in the summer.
When you were a child,
When I was a child, yeah.
And then when you were growing up and married and living in Montreal, did you come back in the summers then?
We came back to visit. Margie and I were done a lot of traveling over the years, and I didn't have that long of a vacation either as a...
And there were usually medical conferences in the summertime.
Other demands
we
in the
traveled
summer,
to.
yeah.
Greg was giving papers or...
But who was using this cottage, or the cabin as it then was? Were your parents still living and using it at that time, or?
No, my dad died when I was very young. He died when I think I was in maybe grade 10 or grade 11. 1958, maybe? Yeah,
So there was just his mother.
it was just my mother.
And that's why the aunts looked after you so much as well,
Yes,
to
yes,
help her out.
I
Well,
think
that's-
so, yes.
So when you came here as a child and stayed with your aunts, tell us about what did you do? What did you do at the cottage, and who did you play with, and all those things?
Played with Donnie Silverwood. The Silverwoods had
Dairy.
a cottage, I think, next door to where Ted Hall has his cottage now. And my first job was spending the summer painting their cottage. But Donnie Silverwood, we were great buddies, and would play badminton. Was our big sport. We had a badminton net out there, and we would spend hours playing badminton. We would play a game which we called chase, which was sort of a version of hide and seek in the woods, because the property over there in those days was all fairly dense woods, and it was great for playing this game of chase, and all the kids in the neighborhood would come down, and we would have these games of chase. So it was
I seem to recall you mentioning mud ball fights across the creek.
oh yes, the mud ball, it was a very muddy creek, and who did we have the mud ball fights with? I guess probably the kids on the west end of the beach had the mud ball fights with the kids on the east end of the creek, or something like that.
Yeah, you're over in Orchard Beach. Did you go over to the main beach much as a teenager, or was that part of your?
It was a little bit
Recreation?
frowned upon, you know. This was the main beach wasn't. It was a little bit doubtful when you went over to the main beach.
Why is that?
Well, there were
City people?
gambling joints, and the sort of things you used to see on a midway at the Western Fair. Yeah, spent some time on the main beach, but not a lot.
What about the Stork Club? Was that ever part of your life or not?
It was, and it's one of Margie's great beefs that I never took her to a Star Club, because
You didn't get the opportunity to turn down.
we weren't married until when what was
64.
64. Margie and I were married.
Then it burned down before that? When did the...
57, wasn't it?
When did the Stork Club burn down? We could look that
It
up.
was in the
Oh, but I guess it
70s.
wasn't running.
I think it was the 70s.
Yeah,
Yes, I
in
think
the
you're right,
70s.
Nora.
Yeah.
70s, did it?
Yeah.
But it wasn't running as a dance place at that point.
Oh,
Not as much. It wasn't. It wasn't what it had been.
I'll
by
admit
that
I did
time.
take other girls to dance at the Stork Club when I was in high school.
And you said you've got some furniture here that probably came from the Fraser House up on Inverary.
Yes.
How would that have come to be?
Well, the Fraser House, when it was demolished, they sold off a bunch of the furniture from the Fraser House, and I bet that my aunts, I'm just guessing, I bet that my aunts bought some of this furniture.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to have that kept in the village.
Uh-huh.
Tell us. So when your parents bought this cabin or this place, it was a one-room cabin. Tell us about that and how it's changed since then, and also I think you told us it had been moved from a different location, right? It used to be further out.
Yes, it used to be situated 2 or 3 blocks down the lake. And in the wake of Hurricane Hazel, the property which it was on, it was falling in the lake. And it was the cottage that was there. And I don't know the name of the people who owned the cottage, but the cottage was divided up into 3 parts. And one part was the little one-room cabin. We're sitting on the porch of that. It was an open porch when it was first built, but a little one-room cabin moved here. Another third of the cottage was moved down to the corner of Harrison Place, and we're not sure what happened to the third part.
And then you've changed the one-room cabin into a much bigger home. Was that when
Well,
you decided
this was
to
when
move back?
Marg and I, maybe, did we start doing that before we moved down, Margaret?
Oh, yes.
Yes, we did. I think I started building addition after addition after addition onto the property, but this is I think the first thing was the closed-in porch that we did. This where we're sitting right now it was an open porch, and I think that was the first thing we did.
You did that personally?
I did, yeah, I did a lot of
Good
the work on the interior of this personally, not the exterior, you know, I had that done, but yeah, a lot of the interior finishing here was done by me.
It's beautiful.
That's one of my hobbies.
And when you moved back, were you already interested in the history here, or you just picked that up when you came back? Because you've done you've been a real leader in the historical research in Port Stanley.
Well, you know, when I was working or earning a living in Montreal, I did not have very much spare time, and no, I think history became an interest to me when we moved down here.
And when you moved back to Port Stanley, were some of the people you'd known when you came as a child still around, or did you simply make a new community? Or
a few of them were. I'm trying to name names and I can't. Mostly it was a new community.
Yeah. And your aunts, did they keep the cottage there while you were doing your renovations and so on here?
They had pretty well passed away by then.
And the house was then sold to somebody else?
No, it stayed in the family, and then when Margie and I moved down here, we sort of didn't want to move into a big cottage. We decided we'd renovate this place, and my aunt and uncle lived there for a while, and then eventually Margie and I decided that we would subdivide the property, and now it's Brent Barr and his wife they weren't the original buyers. How many people were there? I'm not sure, but
It's passed hands.
That's changed hands a few
And
times.
his wife Robin.
Yeah.
You didn't tell us anything about the swimming times here. Did you do a lot of swimming in the lake?
Didn't do a lot of swimming, no. Some, because in those years there was always a little bit of a sand beach down in front of us, so we'd go down probably every afternoon to, play on the beach for an hour or so, but didn't spend a lot of time swimming, no.
And the ladies mentioned a tennis court that they had out there.
Oh, right, which used to be over there when the cottage was out there. And again, I was telling you earlier about that big oxbow in the creek, that the creek would go around that way. So there was a lot of Darch property out there, which is hard to imagine now, but it was because the deeds of a Darch property reached to the middle of the creek, and the creek made an oxbow back to the east. So that there was enough room out there for that cottage and a tennis court, which I very vaguely remember the tennis court. We think that cottage was moved back as far as it would go in 1954. But prior to that, family history has that cottage was moved 7 times.
Moving it.
That was the
7 times.
7 times. And that was typical of all the cottages along the lakefront. All own these long, narrow lots extending back to Harrison Place, and everybody wanted a cottage which was within 15 or 20 feet of the lake. And then as erosion came along, and I estimate that about 10 feet a year of land was lost to erosion. from the time that cottages were first started being built up to about 1938, when people discovered that they could dump cement rubble over their bank. This is no longer legal to do, but for many years it was legal to do. But that was started in about 1938 that people started dumping this rubble, I think. But prior to that, when everybody had cottages on the lakefront, when their land eroded, no problem. Everybody's cottage was on cedar posts, and you just jacked your house up, fastened it to a tractor, or maybe even a team of horses, pulled it back 20 feet, put it on new cedar posts. So 7 times the large cottage, we think, was moved back and back and back.
And they planned for it. And it's interesting that they designed they laid out the lots to be long and narrow so that they could do that, knowing that this was going to happen.
Yeah, I wonder. That's certainly a valid speculation.
What about, you've mentioned Hurricane Hazel. You must remember that time, eh? And was there a big change in the configuration of the bank at that time?
You know, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
I guess Hurricane Hazel, it wasn't during the summer.
Right.
So we wouldn't have been down here. I think Hurricane Hazel was in the fall. I'm guessing.
I think so.
October,
Yeah.
I think, yeah. And we'll certainly put in the picture that you've got. It's a great aerial shot. Looks like it was taken from Canadian Forces plane, which is on the wing. So
Yeah.
that was.
I think it's CFPL.
Oh,
CFPL.
Oh, is it?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah,
there you
CFPL
go.
TV. So Art Goodwin or something, or somebody before him maybe.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. What else do you want to share with us, Craig? Anything else?
Well, it's been fun talking to you and fun showing you around.
You've got a beautiful place, and it's that much more beautiful because of the history.
Well, thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
Thank you.